segment, we're going to be discussing another kind of Zoey Gardener video on putting asylum seekers in tents and the reality of that, as well as looking at an actual facility we had, which was quite barbaric, the point where the government were sued over it, and they may have to give evidence around the facility that was used. So let's have a listen to what Gardner has to say.
All of us just need to start being a little bit more realistic. You listen to the likes of Andrea Jenkins. She says horrible, dehumanizing and despicable things like the fact that we should leave homeless people on the streets in tents, and you want to believe the fairy tale that this time this is the thing that's tough enough, that's cruel enough, that's harsh enough, it'll make them all disappear. They'll go somewhere else, don't care where. Somewhere else, another country will deal with them. It's nonsense, it's dangerous, it's destroying the soul of this country, and anybody who is halfway decent will stand up and speak up at this stage in our politics, because we are echoing an extremely dark and dangerous part of history right now.
Why are you so convinced, Zoe, that it won't stop people coming?
I would like to give us the example of Saudi Arabia, right? A country which is not signed up to the Refugee Convention or international legal frameworks on human rights, where you cannot seek asylum and be given a hotel room, where in fact they are so extreme in their opposition to people attempting to cross the border irregularly that hundreds of people attempting to make that crossing from Yemen have been shot by border guards and killed at the border. Men, women and children have been shot, and they are not entitled to anything when they cross the border, but they continue to cross it. Why? Because migration in these circumstances is life. People move. We always have.
With this situation specifically as well, there is a hot war going on with the Houthi rebels, and Yemen is in a disaster situation. I think there was a civil war there. It's getting there are multiple countries at war with the Houthis as well.
We always will. We move from where we have no chance to live to where we have a chance and where there is a future for our children. It made up last year 5% of immigration to the UK, the people coming on the boats. 5%. This is an utterly, disgracefully overblown story. It is truly revolting that we are talking in such sadistic terms as of leaving these people homeless on our streets, which would obviously be bad for our communities, and
it'd be a public health crisis, as well as a safety crisis of people getting into fights, or it's just a disaster. Like, we have many problems with the homeless people as is.
And it is really important to emphasize again, these are not 4-star hotels. They may once have been 4-star hotels. They are squalid places where people are not allowed to work, and that is the key, because what we really need to do is let these people work, and then guess what? They can pay for their own accommodation.
She's right again. That's the point, is we don't allow people to work here, and then you're kind of forced to give them housing, because what else are you supposed to do? There are obligations and things like that. Other countries do allow asylum seekers to work. She talks here about cutting out the lies about 4-star hotels. Asylum hotels are grim beyond words. So that's something I didn't know, to be honest. And this person here saying Jenkins made a distinction between genuine asylum seekers and between illegal migrants. And how do you know someone's a genuine refugee unless you process their claim? Which is dumb, because Jenkins, a lot of people from Ukraine. It's like, are you saying people from Afghanistan, for example, or people from Yemen aren't genuine refugees? So this distinction here is stupid. But if we look at some of the facilities we've put people in, so people held at UK Asylum Centre sue government for human rights breaches. So this is from April of this year. This is a story I didn't even know about. At least 250 people who were detained by Manston Asylum Centre during a period when it was dangerously overcrowded and grappling with outbreaks of infectious diseases are suing the government for unlawful detention and other breaches of their rights. They include a woman who had a miscarriage, a child whose age was recorded as 5 years older than he was, classifying him as an adult, and a teenager who was a victim of torture and trafficking. The claims arise from when the Home Office site in Kent for processing people who had crossed the channel on small boats was described by a senior union official as a humanitarian crisis on British soil. And did this deter anyone from coming here? No. Even when they're putting people in the barracks, I think it's Napier Barracks, did that stop people coming here? No. As the former independent chief inspector of borders immigration, David Neal, said, poorly managed and insanitary conditions were so bad that he was rendered speechless. Andy Baxter, the Assistant General of the Prison Officers Association, raised the alarm about conditions on the site and response to concerns from members of his union who worked there. After visiting, he described the unprecedented situation, which more closely resembled a refugee camp in an unstable country rather than a home office, temporary staging post for new arrivals. It's just crazy work, this situation is disaster. But only, it's only between, this is where prime ministers might have to come out in front of select committees to answer questions around this. Those bringing claims against the government include a 19-year-old from Sudan who was the victim of, Sudan where there's a civil war going on, who was the victim of torture and trafficking. Although his vulnerabilities were not recorded, he was detained at Manston for 33 days. He said he was often hungry and was only allowed one shower the whole time he was there in 33 days. He was not given any change of clothes. He said that some of the officials he encountered at Manston told him, "Go back to your country." Another, a 17-year-old Kurdish boy from Iraq, was given a date of birth 5 years older than his actual age, despite insisting he was a child. He was detained for 12 days. A Syrian woman who had a particularly difficult time, Syria, which is still going through a really tumultuous time there. She arrived in the UK with her husband and 5 young children, but when her husband complained to guards about the condition at Manston, he was removed from the site and placed in an immigration detention centre. So you've removed a person from his pregnant wife. Okay. She did not know where he'd been taken, so he didn't even tell her, and feared he'd been deported. What was the need for this? She and the children spent 11 days in a freezing, filthy tent and were only allowed to leave to go to the toilet when her children. So the whole tent thing is, we literally did it. This whole idea of a contained facility, it's happened. She herself vomited every morning and later discovered she was pregnant. She was unable to access medical care while in Manston. Why is that? And when she was released and could seek treatment, it was discovered the baby had died inside her. After she and her children were released from Manston, she was finally able to reunite with her husband, but says that the impact of being detained in Manston continues to affect them all. Why are we doing this as a country? The cost of, the amount of legal challenges we're going to face are going to be far more than anything else, than just housing them properly. Emily Soothill of Dighton Pierce Glynn, who's representing some of those bringing legal action relating to their time at Manston, said, "We consider that our client was falsely imprisoned and that the conditions in Manston were such that their human rights were breached. People seeking asylum are more vulnerable to physical and mental illness. They have the right to be treated with dignity and should not be detained in this way." And you got Joe Pennington of Wilson Solicitors representing other legally challenging their time in Manston, said, "The humanitarian crisis that unfolded at Manston in the autumn of 2022 is not what you would expect to see in our country with well-developed systems for accommodating refugees. Our clients want the truth about how it happened and who let it happen and who's going to prevent it again." So I think this was during COVID. It would have been, but it does sound like it's more recent. But I'm not sure if it's been closed or not. But it's clearly there's investigations going on into Manston. UK Migrant Centre sees 6-fold rise in a year of staff sacked over failing drug tests. So clearly there's a madness going on at these places. There's a madness going on. So the Home Office really need to get a handle on this, because it's going to cost a fortune, in legal fees and cases and things like that. The site is located on the former RAF Manston. It's just crazy. So all of the stuff she wanted, the Tories literally did, but they hid it. And it's all coming out now, I guess. I should have been more clued on this. That's on me. That's a fumble on my part. I wasn't too aware of this story. I know they used the Napier Barracks as one of the places, but the government getting sued over this. So clearly the deterrents aren't working. It doesn't matter if you put people in these places. They're still going to cross the channel. So ultimately, Jenkins' idea is stupid. So stupid. But she never was the smartest person around anyways. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.